Welcome today to the Brewery Underground Podcast, where, once again, it doesn't happen often, but it's happening today. We're on location from Blackstone Brewery and Nashville Brewing. Steve Sullivan here, along with Scott Touron, and an old familiar face, not old, but a familiar face, who we were at your brewery St. Patrick's Day. Mr. Scott Mertie, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great. Glad to have you guys here.
Thank you for us being here and coming back on with us.
Sure thing.
We were here St. Patrick's Day, if I remember.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that was one event. This is a whole nother event.
Today we're talking about the next big celebration of the year.
Which, that's right. We are all Oktoberfest today on this podcast episode. And in Brewery Underground tradition, boys, let's hoist our beers.
And say Prost.
Prost.
Prost. Yes.
Yes.
We did our homework, Scott.
I know it. We are drinking the Nashville Fest beer today. Nashville Brewing Fest beer.
That's right.
And this is good stuff.
Well,
I've
thank
had
you.
it before.
Thank
and
you.
look forward to having it again.
Before we get started, our friends at Deep South Growler say hello to
Oh,
you.
good. They're
Saw them yesterday.
definitely great people.
Yep. They've got some of this coming, they said. They're just going to, I think it's whenever.
Yeah, so our Fest beer, we just packaged it, and so it's going out in the market. Yeah.
Let's see.
So the first question off the bat, because we were with a group of friends over the weekend, and everybody sat around talking about this. Does it seem like Oktoberfest season? Does it start earlier and earlier every year? What do you think about that?
So it does seem to. So what happens is, and there's several different arguments with this, but it all comes down to distribution.
Yep.
Which means dollars. And so the distributors or the retailers kind of dictate to the distributors. They want to have certain things set up in their retail establishments. And part of that had to do with, particularly Oktoberfest, is Sam Adams. They started kind of dictating this. And so to have, in the retail establishments, all the Oktoberfest beers out. Initially, again, it was Sam Adams, but then the retailers wanted other beers outside just Sam Adams. So they reach out to distributors, and then distributors who are buying the beer from us dictate, yes, we want Oktoberfest out. And that is the same thing with the Blackstone Pumpkin Ale. They want it out earlier and earlier, and everyone's like, why is a pumpkin ale out in August? Why is an Oktoberfest out in August? So we have it ready in August. We consider the Oktoberfest season officially to start in September, which is really what it does in Germany. And in mid-September is truly when Oktoberfest starts. But so we definitely have everything ready. This is a lager beer, and as you guys know, and all your listeners know, lager means to age, and it's a Marzen-style beer. Marzen is German for March. So it was brewed in the spring, lagering all summer long, recently packaged, and now ready to enjoy.
I have to admit, I am one of the first, not one of the first people, but when I saw that Oktoberfest Sam Adams was out on the shelves the other day, I had to go out and get it. But I also have your beer now, which I plan to get anyway. And, the question I have, because I am a big Oktoberfest guy, why do you think Oktoberfest is such a popular beer with so many people across the country and really across the world?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it just has to do with the theme of the party. Just like when you guys were here for St. Patty's Day and everyone wants to drink a Guinness or a green beer, and green beer obviously had absolutely nothing to do with St. Patrick's or anything like that. So, but it's an excuse to party. So, it's hot, especially here in Nashville. It's very hot. We've had a long summer. We've had a few mornings now recently where you start feeling that fall football weather, and to me, Oktoberfest kind of coincides with that. When you start feeling it, even though it's still getting 90 during the day, we are having some cool mornings. And so I think everyone just gets in the mood, and Oktoberfest truly is just about a party. It is originally a wedding festival, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. I'm sure you got some questions about that. But it's just an excuse to party and enjoy, and everyone has been drinking summer beers, and now all of a sudden we got a beer, an amber colored beer. It's a little more malty and just starts to go well with cooler temperatures.
It does, and part of that is, okay, I don't mind it coming in early it also goes away early too at the same time. So that's the other side. Like I love Oktoberfest beers, but then that goes away, and then you got the next stuff. That's what October.
Yeah,
technically, the new wave will come in.
The way a lot of the retailers work is so they'll have beers that they contract to be year round, and then they have beers that they contract with to be seasonal. And so Oktoberfest was viewed more as a September, October, November beer, and that's turned into an August, September, October beer. Mm-hmm. So now it's, at the end of October, it's gone.
Right.
Now, we'll certainly make it as long as people want to buy it, but that's just how it works. And then we all of a sudden jump into winter beers. So that's when we get in our Bach and all that. But the Blackstone Pumpkin, that fortunately does kind of still lag behind a month right now. So that's more of the September, October, November. So we're still having that at Thanksgiving.
And I love that because that tends to be a little bit heavier. It's got those holiday, those Christmas flavors, which are really good. And that was when I would see the pumpkin come out in September, I'm like, okay, all right, now we're really kind of getting into fall.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to throw out about the pumpkin, I know we're here to talk about Oktoberfest, but that Blackstone pumpkin beer, that won gold last year, so that's the number 1 rated pumpkin beer in the United States right now.
It's really good.
So. It is fantastic. Look, and I know we've talked about it on tap. We don't have to talk about it on tap, but it's one of the 3 beers I rate of 5.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
It is. That is one of my favorites.
No, it really is. So your best beer, would you say over the last few years since you've had it? Well, you've had it for a long time, certainly. Have you seen a spike in production because of the demand over the years? Where does it stand?
I wouldn't say a spike. It is always popular in the fall.
Yeah.
So it's a seasonal beer. We have, as far as our lagers under the Nashville Brewing brand, we have our amber beer, which is year-round. But our fest beer certainly is a different beer than the amber. It's much more maltier. And so that spike definitely goes up, when it comes out. People want it. We sell out of it. We always try to have that magic ball to figure out how much do we need to make. And so, we ramp up, because we're brewing it months ahead of time. And so when it sells out, it sells out. Because it's not something like now all of a sudden, we need to make more. We can't, because, it's a beer that truly needs to lager, and it takes time.
And traditionally, it's been brewed in March.
So
modern day, is it still that way?
So we're able to speed up things a little bit with modern day science, but so we still do lager it, and if you want me to jump into a little of the history of that,
sure.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, you've done a YouTube video on that. Yeah. Really, it's fascinating to really share about the history of how the lager is.
So just to clarify, so Oktoberfest is not a style of beer; it's more of a generic term. Oktoberfest is a festival, a Volksfestival as they call it in Germany, originally for a wedding, which we'll get into that in a second. But as far as the beer styles go, Oktoberfest was originally that style of beer was a Dunkel, which is German for dark. It was a dark beer, and really all lagers were dark beers. But as Oktoberfest first started in 1810, it was the first Oktoberfest. It was a dark beer until the 1870s when some changes in science with malting, the barley malts, and going from a kilning method from a roasting method with an open flame, able to come out with lighter beers. So the amber style Marzen, as we know, came out at that point. It was always referred to as a Marzen because it was brewed in the March and lagered in the summer. But the modern-day Marzen that we know came out in the 1870s. And that is an ambered color beer. So it was lightened down purely because of popularity, what people wanted at that time. And then it wasn't until really a century later that we came out with, or I say we, that the Germans came out with Fest beer. The breweries of Oktoberfest, and there's select breweries that are allowed to participate in Oktoberfest. But they came out with the Fest beer, which is a little bit lighter in color, lighter in alcohol. Most of them tend to be slightly hoppier, but they were really made to be able to be where you can consume a little bit more in a festival format than the maltier, little higher alcohol Marzen beer. But so both the Marzen and the Fest beer are kind of fall into the category of Oktoberfest beers, but they're really are two different beers.
So that was one of my questions. So Oktoberfest is kind of the generic term, covers all of them. Let me throw some words at you that I kind of get confused about, and maybe they're all synonymous. Prost, and I know that means cheers in German, but also I see that on labels. Prost beer, a Marzen, a Fest beer, an Oktoberfest. Are they all similar?
They're
all
all basically the same thing. So a Prost beer is, they're just using the German term as cheers, just a beer to a celebratory beer. Marzen beer, again, would be the more, say, traditional Oktoberfest beer. When I say traditional, going back a century. Prior to that, it was a Dunkel. It was a much darker beer. And then, mostly what's been served at Oktoberfest, and I go to Oktoberfest quite a bit in Germany, they are a lighter version. So even though we call our beer a Fest beer, it is truly a Marzen beer as far as the style goes. It's more of the amber style. We call it Fest beer. That was purely just for marketing purposes, because if we called it Oktoberfest, people think October, only drink this beer in October. If we call it Marzen, when we first came out with this, no discredit to the public, people listening, but people don't know what the hell Marzen means.
Right.
So we're trying to think of something, Fest beer, festival beer. So we called it a Fest beer, but the style truly is a Marzen beer versus what a German Fest beer would be.
Okay.
So, yeah.
When you were delving really into the history of tracing back Oktoberfest in other countries and how they did it way back when, what really kind of struck your fancy? Like, this is really way out there, because it was back in the day where they were just figuring it out.
Yeah, they were just figuring it out, and lagers in general they were figuring out because that it really was a happy accident. I know we briefly talked about this before, but going back 700-800 years, originally it was the monasteries that were in Bavaria trying to put quality with their beer product, saying we're not brewing during the summer because bacteria grows during the warmer months, so we're gonna brew in the winter through the spring, which would be March, and then we're not going to brew anymore until the fall comes about. So they would, that last batch of beer or batches of beer would be the Marzen beer, which would be they take all the leftover malt, all the extra malt, and brew those beers, and then they would lager that all summer long. And to lager, they would put in caves, and later dugout cellars, but originally caves. They pack them with ice to keep them cool, and they would drink off it throughout the year, and ultimately that was referred to as old beer. Because they were drinking this old beer from March, waiting for the new beer. Because in ale terms, when we think of ale, ales are fresh beers. So they're like, we're still drinking this old beer until fall comes around when we can start brewing again. And in the fall, once we start brewing, we have our new beer. But we got to get rid of this old beer. So long before the official Oktoberfest of 1810, they were having fall festivals. Every culture had harvest festivals, to celebrate the fall harvest. And with that, they were drinking the old beer to get rid of it, to make room in the cellars so they could start brewing fresh beer and putting that in the cellars. Yeah. But over time, the yeast, and this is really getting into the science of things, but the yeast cells, the ale yeast cells, were not surviving in these cooler temperatures. And again, that happy accident, what happened was there was another type of yeast cell that started surviving at these cooler temperatures. And later we found out, once we had the microscope, this all came about in the 1870s at the Carlsberg Brewery, which ironically, I was there last week. They're famous for their laboratory at the Carlsberg Brewery, but they're the first brewery to isolate a yeast cell.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So in the 1870s, they isolated that original yeast cell that came from Spaten. So Carl Jacobsen, who's the son of the founder of Carlsberg Brewery, he brought yeast from Spaten in Munich to Denmark, to Copenhagen, and their lab, they were able to isolate that yeast cell and come out with what now we know is what the lager yeast cell is. And so we have our ale yeast and we have our lager yeast. But over, centuries prior to that, we really didn't know the difference, and it just started happening over time. But because we weren't distributing beer was just drank locally. As those ale yeast cells were dying off, the lager yeast cells were surviving, and they would use old batches of beer to bring the yeast in to ferment new batches of beer, even though they didn't know what yeast was again. Right. They knew something was happening, something was alive in that. So they would, like in the bourbon industry, we call it heads and tails. So bring kind of a little bit from the old batch to the new batch. Yep. That's how they were keeping that. And over time, they started isolating yeast cells. But it wasn't until Carlsberg that they truly isolated that yeast cell. I'm going off on a huge tangent.
No, it's great.
But okay. from the science standpoint,
they knew something was happening. They didn't know quite what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. They knew something was happening. But they had these Volks festivals that to celebrate in the fall festival for this fall harvest and drink up the old beer. And that's where Oktoberfest, the original Oktoberfest, started until 1810, which became the modern Oktoberfest.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that that I think is really cool is that the Nashville Brewing Fest beer, you've actually been able to trace it back to the first Oktoberfest in 1810.
So that original Oktoberfest was a wedding celebration. So King Maximilian, who was the first king of Bavaria. So I don't know if you ever heard of the Wittelbachs. So the Wittelbachs are the royalty of the... No, please. Yeah, we're going to open some more beers here for those that are listening.
Yeah. This is a beer podcast after all.
Why not?
Steve,
there you go.
Cheers.
Prost.
Thank you.
And so the Wittelbachs were the royalty of Munich and Bavaria, and of course, 1,000 years ago, Germany was not the Germany we know of today, but it was many regions that started coming together. And so there's a lot of history with the Wittelbachs, but in 1810, or shortly before 1810, a few years before that, Napoleon declared, because of the relationship with Bavaria, they were all dukes then, but he declared that a kingdom. So Maximilian became the first king in modern-day Germany. And he was not very popular because he started uniting. So originally it was the area in Munich and bringing in Bavaria and kind of uniting all this. And so he was not the most popular guy in the world because all of a sudden people are paying taxes to a king that they didn't necessarily want, and it was dictated. And, like any monarchy, all of a sudden they're having to do things that they weren't used to. And so when his son was getting married in 1810, his son was Prince Ludwig. Again, this was the first king. So dukes for centuries. So the first king, he's trying to figure out, how can I get popular? Basically, he used his son's wedding as a PR stunt. So his son was, Ludwig was marrying a woman named Teresa. And he decided to invite all the commoners of Munich to this wedding celebration, and which was unheard of. I mean, this was royalty, and all of a sudden you have commoners coming.
Right.
And, of course, beer was provided. There was other activities, a big horse race and all that, and that was in 1810. And it was in October back then. October 12th, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was October 12th, was the wedding celebration, and then it lasted for 5 days. And what happened was the people were so appreciative that they got invited to this event. They wanted to celebrate the wedding again the next year, and it continued and continued. Now, a few years after that, the Napoleonic Wars ended up, we had a few-year hiatus of Oktoberfest, and after that, it picked back up again, and then we had a few plagues. And then we had World War I and World War II, and then COVID. So Oktoberfest had been canceled, I think, about a dozen times over the years, but it's either been with plagues or wars.
But major event.
Yeah.
Still stands the test of time.
But yeah, it was originally a wedding celebration. And again, it was that dark Dunkel beer, which was all of the beer of the time until later in the 1800s when they were able to develop lighter malts.
You alluding to back what Steve mentioned on your YouTube video that you had sent us. you had mentioned something about Oktoberfest coming out of pale ales and IPAs. Like, that goes back even further than Oktoberfest.
Yeah, so,
how does that?
Yeah, so again, beer being dark. So dark beer was the thing. They had no way to control when they were starting malting beer. And malting started as a way to really get more bang for the buck when it comes to getting more sugar out of the malt or out of the barley. Go through a malting process. You get more starches that are convertible into fermentable sugars. So you get more alcohol out of your bushel of grain was malting. But to do that, you had to go through a sprouting process where the malt would germinate and it'd start to sprout, and then you would dry it out, and it used to be open flame. And with open flame, you really could not control the color, so the beer was dark. And it was really dark all over the world. In the 1700s, the British figured out a kilning method to kiln malt rather than the open flame, and so they were able to control color. So it was a pale malt or pale ale that the Brits first came out with. And so the founder of Spaten Brewery out of Bavaria, he sent his son, supposedly a training mission, but there's a little bit of espionage involved at the time. Again, breweries,
take something home with you.
Yeah, breweries weren't exporting beer at that time and stuff, so it wasn't really viewed as competition. But he sent his son and another brewer over to England as apprentices to learn what the Brits were doing. And one of the big things that they learned, and they were supposed to be there to learn about fermentation, but what they learned about was malting, what they took back with them. And with that, they brought back how to malt beer using the kilning method, or malt barley using the kilning method, having lighter colors. And so that first official light color came out in 1840, the 1841 brewing season. Of course, this is the winter. And that was in Vienna, which was the partner of Spaten's son that went. His name was Dreher, Druehl, I think. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. But he came out with the first amber lager, which nowadays we call it a Vienna lager.
Right.
So the next year in Pilsen, Czech Republic, they recruited a brewer. They had a whole meltdown. The whole town revolted in Pilsen because their beer was shit. And they honestly, they complained. They threw all the beer out in the streets and said our beer is shit. And they protested town council, bring in a brewer that can make some decent beer.
Wow.
And so these were just they were doing lagers, but they were shitty lagers, and they wanted something different. And so they recruited this guy named Grohl from Wilshofen, Bavaria, which is right on the Danube River. Recruited him, and he brought that kilning method. But in Pilsen, they had something different. They had soft water, so the water was different. And then their Saaz hop, that came out with Pilsner beer. So then that came about, and then later, again, a couple of decades later, Spaten came out with an amber lager, which then became the Oktoberfest that we know in the 1870s.
Yeah, it's really progressed.
Yeah,
you can really see it. Something that stands out that you talked about a few minutes ago. You're going to some of these countries where it was like where Oktoberfest was born, and you're seeing this firsthand. What is your reaction now, having had that experience?
Yeah, so it's, I'm kind of dubbed a beer historian, but I'm by no means a historian. And, I'm fascinated by it. I appreciate it, and I try to share the information that I learned because I love to travel. And growing up, I hated history, and now I'm fascinated by history. But going to some of these places, particularly in Bavaria, northern Bavaria, where lagers just were first developed.
Yeah.
And in Munich, where Trieseweizen, which is the area where the original Oktoberfest happened in 1810, where that wedding celebration is still where Oktoberfest is held to this day. Over 200 years later, it's still held in the same spot. And they call it Trieseweizen because Teresa was the bride, and Weizen is meadow. And so Teresa's Meadow is where the wedding was, and that's what they call it to this day. So in Germany, they don't say we're going to Oktoberfest. They say we're going to Weizen.
Okay.
So, and that's not Weizen to be confused with like Hefeweizen or Weiss beer. Yeah.
But as a beer historian, as you say you are now, is that part of your bucket list? Like, you've checked that off?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I do it again and again. It's not something. It's not a one and done. It's one of those things that's it's just fascinating to be part of. And You're sitting there drinking in an environment where people have been celebrating this for over 200 years.
Yep.
And unlike Oktoberfests here in this country, there are only 6 beers represented, right? And they have to be from Munich to be a part of that Oktoberfest.
That's
correct?
right. So these were breweries that were around in 1810. So when this original wedding celebration happened in the city of Munich, and there were 8, and there was a little bit of consolidation, so now there's 6. But those are still the 6 breweries that are only allowed to participate. And so they are a couple of those brands we know because they're exported here in the U.S. Paulaner, Spaten, Hofbrau, which is the royal brewery. That's what the Vittelbachs, that royal family that I mentioned, they started that brewery centuries earlier. Lowenbrau, Hackershore, and Augustiner. And Augustiner was the original monk brewery. Paulaner was also a monk brewery, but Augustiner is the oldest brewery in Munich by far. But those are the only 6 breweries that are allowed to sell beer at Oktoberfest.
Do you know of the best places or places in town, liquor store-wise, where you can find those brands?
You kind of put me on the spot because I do not know offhand. I know most of them are going to carry Paulaner, Spaten, and a lot of them carry Hofbrau as well. The Augustiner, the Hackershore, and Lowenbrau, I do not see as much exported into the U.S.
I'd have to say, Cool Springs Wine and Spirits does a good job. They've got, I don't know if you've been in there in a while, in that beer section. They've got one wall that's kind of nothing but exports, or imports, I guess, in this one. And they do a good job of that. I don't know if they've got every one, but I recognize a lot of those brands.
And there's a lot of other German Oktoberfest beers that are sold here in the United States, and a lot of other Bavarian Oktoberfest beers. But as far as Munich Oktoberfest beers, it's just those 6.
The originals, so to speak.
Yep.
So we mentioned, in the beginning of this podcast that we had you on a couple of months ago on our St. Patrick's Day podcast, and we actually did a 2-part series on that. You can check out episode 16 and 17 at Sullivan and Scott Touron, breweryadventures.com.
Shameless plug.
And on Spotify, and of course on NashvilleBrewing.com as well. One of the things that we talked about, and this is why I'm bringing it up, it's not just a shameless plug. No, you have a beer can collection of over 10,000, which we know is impressive. Do you know how many Oktoberfest ones you may have from around the world?
Yeah, so surprisingly, I do not have that many. Now, I'd say in the past decade, we have a lot of breweries in the U.S. that are craft breweries that are starting to can, but those are not really things that I collect. I collect older cans. So I have a Spaten Oktoberfest beer can, probably from the 60s. But as far as the German breweries doing Oktoberfest, they just did not export. They did not can. Canning came later. Beer was more of a local thing. So in the 70s in the United States, we started seeing a lot of breweries starting to do Oktoberfest, particularly in Wisconsin, Cincinnati. I know you're a Cincinnati guy.
Yep.
Really not so much out of St. Louis because that was so much of a Anheuser-Busch environment. You didn't see Budweiser doing that, but a lot of the breweries in Wisconsin were doing that. Towns that still had mid-sized breweries, not national breweries.
Of your collection, at St. Patrick's Day, you had shared with us a video of a Guinness that you had that was many years old. I don't remember. It was 50 years old.
Yeah, I think that was probably late 50s, early 60s Guinness can. Yeah.
And the video, you drank it.
Yes.
You drank one. Do you have any unopened Oktoberfest that you
I do not. I do not. And again, historically, I mean, back until just the past couple of decades, Oktoberfest beer, it was truly just a seasonal beer. It was made to be drunk at that time. It was not exported. It was just considered a local beer, whereas Guinness at that time was an export beer.
Yeah, it is funny you talk about that because we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast where it's almost become like on your mark, set, go. Here comes Oktoberfest season.
Yep.
I know I had seen some Oktoberfest out already like the end of July, and I was going, wow.
Yeah.
They're
crazy.
pushing it every year.
Yeah.
But we were also, there were a group of friends, we were talking about this. Do you think if you go further north maybe, where the weather is sometimes a little cooler, even maybe in the summertime, that the Oktoberfest beers are coming out a little bit even sooner than that? Do you think
Probably
that's
so. I travel up north quite a bit for business, and so I definitely see it out. Yeah.
What about the way, to Steve's point, the way we come out with it earlier and earlier here? Is that even a thing in Germany or Eastern Europe, or do they wait for Oktoberfest for those beers to come out?
They are very, very traditional over there. So
we're
not going to see this style beer out until September.
Right.
And so the Oktoberfest, just to kind of let you know how that officially starts. So that official wedding that I mentioned was in mid-October, and that's how the celebration was for a number of years. And then, in the later 1800s, because of cooler temperatures and not having daylight, once daylight savings time came around, they said, let's push Oktoberfest up. So that's why we have Oktoberfest in September. So Oktoberfest is always in September. It ends the first Sunday of October. So that's officially how we've had for decades now. The Munich Oktoberfest is always 2 weeks. It starts 2 weeks prior to that first Sunday of October. So it's 3 weekends, 2 weeks back to back. And so our Oktoberfest that we have here at our brewery, we always coincide with the Munich Oktoberfest. But we try and push that back as late as possible just because people in the United States, they don't understand Oktoberfest in September, which I appreciate Cincinnati. Cincinnati has the second largest Oktoberfest in the United States, in the world.
I went.
The largest in the United States, and that's always in September.
Yeah, I went about 5 years ago. I hadn't been since I was younger, and it's extraordinary.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's such a fun event.
Yeah, I was there last year, but they always start the same time that Munich Oktoberfest starts.
Yeah.
They don't go the entire 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's about a 3 or 4 day event where they get hundreds of thousands of people that come in for that.
No, it's fantastic. So I definitely recommend that to go to Cincinnati's Oktoberfest.
Well, let's talk about the German Oktoberfest a little more. If someone were to go for the first time, what would they expect? What would you recommend to them? Could you give them any advice, or just what would you expect to go for the first time?
First thing is hotels are a nightmare in Munich, but German transportation is awesome. So you can stay, an hour, 2 hours outside of Munich. You can stay in Austria. You can stay in other countries and take a train in. It's no problem at all. Take a train into central Munich, and then a subway station, or the subway from there is 2 stops to the Theresienwiese, where Oktoberfest is. So 2 stops and you're there. So it's very simple to get to. You do not have to stay in Munich and pay outrageous hotel prices. Second thing is, just for those that are going, you can't bring backpacks or anything like that in. So they have lockers out there. So keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to carry stuff in. Third thing is dress up. If you don't dress up, you're going to be a minority. So wear your dirndl, wear your lederhosen. Don't wear your slutty Halloween dirndl outfit, though. beer wench outfit. They're more traditional dirndls. I guess I don't have a slutty lederhosen outfit.
No.
So. Lederhosen or lederhosen. But for the girls, just a traditional dirndl. The beer there is, I think right now it's going for €14 for a Mass, which I'm holding up a liter mug right now.
Yeah.
Do not call it a stein. It is not a stein.
No.
Steins stein means stone. A stein is a clay pottery type thing that you see the fancy, molded steins.
More of a decoration.
A glass mug, liter mug, is a Maß. Maß is German for measure. And that goes back centuries, but you would get a measure of beer, and that's a liter of beer. You're not going to get any other size. You're only going to get a beer in the liter. You're only going to get those 6 breweries that we mentioned.
Okay.
They all have their various tents. A few of the breweries have multiple tents. So like Augustiner has a couple different tents. I recommend the Augustiner. Augustiner is, again, the oldest. And I just think Augustiner Oktoberfest beer is phenomenal. Their Marzen is phenomenal beer. I would definitely check them all out, but Augustiner is by far the one to check out.
I assume they're all kind of close proximity to when.
It's like a state fair when you go in there. You're going to have the beer tents. You're going to have food. In the back side of the festival area, you're going to have rides and stuff. Honestly, I've been to Oktoberfest many times. I've never made it back to the rides. I always hang out in the beer tents. But these beer tents, they hold 6,000 to 10,000 people. They are huge.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you, too, the efficiency is amazing. And I mentioned 14 euro. Just have a 20 euro bill. They're not used to tipping in Europe. Now, they do have a lot of tourists. There's a lot of Americans. If you give them a 20, say keep the change, they're going to remember you.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have to wait for a beer. Once your beer starts going down, they're going to remember you because of the tips.
Okay.
Because most Europeans are not going to tip, particularly the Southern Europeans that are coming. There's a lot of Italians, Spanish, Greeks that come up, and they don't tip at all. So 14 euro, they're going to count out and give 14 euro. If you give them 20 euro, as you start going down, they're going to make sure your beer is full.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask how many different Oktoberfest beers you think you've had in your life. You can tell me if you think you know. However, I do want to know, what do you think makes for a good Oktoberfest beer as a guy that likes to drink it? Like, do you know right away if you're drinking somebody else's and you're just like, nah, it's just...
Okay, so two-part question. So first, I have no idea how many different Oktoberfest beers I've had. But I will say, at one Oktoberfest, I think this was in 2018, I had 11 liters. So 11 of these Maß beers. Now, it's throughout the day, but 11 liters, and so 4 liters is a gallon. So if you do the math, so
almost
roughly,
3 gallons.
Almost 3 gallons. I'm a big guy, but still, that's a lot of beer.
A lot of trips to the bathroom, too.
Yeah. Oh, I will say, I mentioned the efficiency. Their bathrooms are so clean. You will not believe how easy it is for both the men's and women's bathrooms. It's not like beer festivals here in the United States with porta potties and stuff. The bathrooms are so clean. They're so efficient, particularly for women. You can go in there, you walk in, you go to the bathroom. There's no lines or anything like that, and the bathrooms are clean. Phenomenal. So back to 11 liters, that about killed me.
Yeah.
It was ended up being a horrible experience, but it was still fun. I passed out on the train, slept on some random stranger's shoulder. But
and this wasn't last year, right?
No, this was in 2018. But to as far as other Oktoberfest beers that I generally, outside of ours, obviously I'm partial. I tend not to drink, and you ask people that know me, that hang out with me and stuff, at other locations. I don't drink many lagers that are made in the United States.
Yeah.
I will try them, but unfortunately, there's just in general, lager beer is hard to make. It's hard to make a good lager. We take pride in the lagers we make here, and unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of lagers that I like in the U.S. We mentioned Sam Adams from the get-go. Sam Adams has great quality control.
Yeah.
They always make good beer. But for the most part, I will go to a German Oktoberfest beer.
But you know a lot of guys and gals around here that
Sure,
own breweries,
yeah.
and not to criticize or bash anybody. We're not into that.
Yeah.
But do you think there's always pressure that everybody needs to have an Oktoberfest beer? Is that that's really something that?
Yeah, I think that's the pressure from the public. The
Yeah.
public definitely wants an Oktoberfest beer, no matter what brewery they're going to. When fall starts, like we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and that cooler temperature comes, people get in mind they want that Oktoberfest style beer, and so they expect every brewery to have an Oktoberfest beer.
Yeah.
And not all craft breweries make lagers. So some of them will do an amber ale, and sometimes they'll call it an Oktoberfest, which is fine. That's no problem doing that. But if they're doing a true Marzen or a Fest beer, those are truly lager beers. Again, Oktoberfest is a generic term.
And they need to have the equipment for that too, to be able to lager it, right?
Sure.
If they don't have it, then that's
You got to have the equipment and the time, and the lab expertise, because again, you're dealing with different yeast.
Yeah.
You're dealing with cooler temperatures, and time is the big thing too, because it's expensive to make a lager.
I think I mentioned on the St. Patrick's episode, I had tried it at home. Don't, kids, if you don't have the equipment, because it didn't come out. I didn't have the equipment to do it, and it didn't come out good.
That was actually something I was wondering, because you're a guy. I don't think you brew anymore, right? But you used to years ago.
No, I mean I've been home brewing since the late 80s, but I don't. When I have access to a brewery like this, I don't need to home brew.
Right. But
Yeah,
home brewing back in the day, did you even try your hand at Oktoberfest?
I tried a couple times, and in fact, my first lager I ever tried was an Oktoberfest.
Okay.
It did not come out well, as you said, because you got to have the right equipment, and you can't expect it. Even if you got the right equipment, you can't expect it to be ready to drink in 2 weeks like an ale. Right. I mean, you've truly got to let it, have time.
Has the ingredients of the Fest beer from the original to now changed at all? Have you changed much?
As far as the ingredients, no.
No.
And all your ingredients or all your beers come from Germany.
So we import 100% of our ingredients, except for the water, from Germany. If you look behind you right now, all those bags of malt, that's Weirmann malt. That comes from Bamberg, Germany, which is northern Bavaria. That's where we get most of our malt for our lagers.
When the brewery first opened, way back when, was this one of the original beers that they were out there selling?
So when Nashville Brewing Company opened in the 1800s, they actually did not brew an Oktoberfest beer at that time. So they started out doing a Dunkel and an Amber. But they were not doing as far as a seasonal Oktoberfest. That was not a thing in the United States, really until after World War II, when we had troops stationed.
Come say hello.
So we got Tyler coming in, and Tyler's making sure everyone is hydrated.
Yeah.
Hi, Tyler.
Great job. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Hi, everybody.
The whole world is watching.
Can I get you guys anything?
I'm good.
Yep, I'm
Any
good.
other?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, so, it wasn't until I think that we had a lot of veterans coming back from Europe that started picking up that German culture, where they started going to Volksfestivals, not necessarily Oktoberfest, but every little town in Germany has what they call a Volksfestival, which is a people's festival. So the people come and have fun, and that is a perfect pour, by the way.
You like that?
Yeah, that is absolutely perfect.
Perfect
I do
pour.
want to get some foam out. Too,
Yeah.
right, at the same
My
time.
on my mother's side, it's real heavy German, and we found out years ago, and this is something that, as you just said, I kind of wonder about. So we had found out on her mother's side that they migrated to the United States from Germany and France in the mid 1800s, and so I, sometimes now I wonder, I'm going, did they come to the United States going, where's some of that Oktoberfest beer,
You called, we can't call them Steins, we call them Moss.
Moss, yes.
How many can you carry? Have you ever tried at one time?
I have never tried, because I will say, this is a little personal thing for me, but I find it very sexy for women. Seeing women, the more mosses they carry, I find that very sexy, and I just don't think it would be sexy for me to be carrying a bunch of those around. So Yeah, I will not carry more than two, one in each hand.
I don't know what it says about me, but it comes up in my YouTube shorts quite often. So maybe it's something along the lines of what you're saying.
It's better than some random porn thing, right? You know,
There you
women carrying masses of beer.
It's awesome. And then you think just when she's got as many as she can carry, they stack them.
Yeah. So there's a science behind it, and I think it's if you get 7 of these together, the handles all come in together. So I think 7. Then you can stack 6 around on top of that. Then you get 1 in the center. So you're getting 14 total, and then the arm wraps around.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if the video is picking this up, but the arm wraps around, and so that 14. And apparently, if you're less than that 7 in the bottom, they don't all fit together. It makes it harder. So if you add the extra one, and then you stack them on, it makes it easier to carry. Okay. And I'm not sure as far as how many pounds that is, but it's definitely impressive.
It's a true science.
So that's something at Oktoberfest too. You know, everyone applauds, and you know, if you're at a table, everyone orders around, and you know, when they bring it at that time. One time I was on the train, and I was staying in Innsbruck, Austria, and I was going to Oktoberfest in Munich. So I was on a train like at 7 in the morning because I wanted to be there when I think it opened at 10. So I got on the train, and I was going from Innsbruck. It's a couple-hour train ride. And somewhere along the way, it picked up a woman. She's in a dirndl, and she's got like these wrist things like what a boxer or something would wear under their gloves. And she's strapping these on, and I'm like, is she going to a fight or what's going on? And then I found out she was a server at Oktoberfest. And so she's getting all these wrist restraints to support her to be carrying all these masses all day long.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's impressive. It's a skill, no doubt.
So you're going to Austria and Germany for Oktoberfest with the Nashville Brewing Company on September 16th to the 24th.
Yeah.
But tell us about that trip. What you going to do?
Yeah, so it's partially sightseeing, but of course we're doing Oktoberfest as well. So you know, it's one of those things. You know, I always enjoy going, and I like sharing the culture. You know, and so trying to get a group to go along. So that's what we did. Partnered with a travel agency, and they kind of put a lot of stuff together. So once you get there, you're bussed, and we're going to a lot of other breweries, outside of just Munich, but we're hitting the hot spots in Munich, Hofbrauhaus, of course, Oktoberfest for a few days. Also going to Augustiner Beer Keller, which I know I bragged on Augustiner Beer earlier, but their beer keller is the largest beer cellar in I mean, literally dug about 3 stories underground, massive dinner areas in these old cellars where they would originally lager the beer. Then up above is their beer garden. It's the largest beer garden in the world. I think it holds 6,000 people, wow. Their beer garden. And so historically, they would, when they would dig out beer cellars, they would plant chestnut trees up above to shade to help cool the cellars underneath so the ground wouldn't heat up. And then people started hanging out under the chestnut trees, and that's where the beer gardens started coming about. So it's the largest beer garden in the world.
How many people you got going with you on that trip?
I think there's 14 signed up right now.
Yeah. That's fun.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is the food over there. What can we expect food-wise? There's probably some obvious stuff, but I'm sure there's some other things too.
Yeah, so Germany is quite diverse. I literally just came back from a trip. I was in Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Just came back on on last Tuesday. But in northern Germany, seafood is huge. You don't see it as much in Bavaria outside of trout. But don't be confused. They call salmon trout and trout salmon there. So if you see it on the menu, it says salmon. It's really trout in Bavaria. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's great. But outside of that, pork is definitely king.
Yep. In
Bavaria. So pork knuckles are huge. That's always a very popular thing. Of course, bratwurst. Weisswurst is the big thing to get, and that is a white sausage. It's veal. It's a white sausage. It's simmered in warm water So it's not a grilled sausage, and it's phenomenal. That's very popular, and you're only going to find that really in Munich and in the Bavarian region. But it's that white sausage. But at Oktoberfest, chickens. That's what you're going to find is the grilled chickens.
Okay. They've got like stacks and stacks.
They're doing
of them.
thousands and thousands of chickens. So basically, you get a chicken in a moss spear, and it's a half bird, and it's just cut in half. But it's the best roasted chicken you're ever going to have. I mean, I love Costco chicken, Costco's roasted chicken,
Yeah.
but it's 100 times better than Costco's roasted chicken.
Anything better than Nashville hot chicken? I mean, come on now, you're in Nashville.
It's not spicy, but
Will there be giant pretzels, I assume?
yes, they have pretzel girls that walk around and sell pretzels.
I wonder how many they can carry.
You know, I've never counted, but they definitely carry a lot. And their pretzels are more of a harder pretzel. We're used to a soft pretzel. They don't do soft pretzels over there. It's more of a, it's a big pretzel, but it's more of a harder, crunchy pretzel.
So we talked about the German Oktoberfest and a little bit about yours and when it is, but talk about what your German Fest or your Oktoberfest is going to be here. What kind of activities are you going to have?
Yes.
And
Yeah. So as I mentioned, our Oktoberfest is always we coincide with the Munich Oktoberfest, so it's always that last Saturday. So this year it's going to be October 5th, and because Oktoberfest officially ends October 6th, that Sunday. So October 5th, we always, of course, feature our Oktoberfest beer, our Fest beer. That's going to be pouring like crazy. We have a band, the best verse band. They always play here. They're phenomenal, just a great band, accordion, tuba player, all that kind of good stuff, playing polka and other good German music. So we do a Stein holding competition, which is
Yeah, buddy.
This is the second year we're doing it. We've been doing it for years, but we're now official with the U.S. Stein holding competition.
Oh, shit.
Where we're a regional qualifier for the state championship. Whoever wins our competition, we do a men's and a women's, and it's literally what it is. You're holding out a Moss. Again, they call it a Stein holding competition, which I disagree with, but you're holding out a glass Moss and full of beer, or it can be water if you don't want the beer.
I got you.
You're holding it straight out, and there's all kinds of rules that come into play, and I'm a certified judge for that. And so we have a men's competition, a women's competition. Before we were doing a certified regional competition, the women would do a half liter, men would do a full liter. But now that we're a certified event venue, the women have to do a full liter as well. So sorry to the ladies, but it's a full liter.
Yeah. How long? I guess it's as long as the person goes. But how long does one of those go? 20 minutes?
20 minutes is really stretched.
Yeah.
So
It's a long time.
Tyler, I don't know if you remember last year offhand, women's 4 minutes maybe.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, 4 minutes. I want to say men's it's about 8 minutes. But it's funny. So you get the bigger guys with a lot of muscles, and they struggle the most. They generally drop out.
Yeah.
And it's generally a skinny, scrawny guy that is in there. And muscle is mass, and mass is heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's not necessarily how strong you are, but you got to keep that hand out. You can't get into arching your back.
Okay.
You can't support. You can't put your hand on your hip.
You're not even leaning against a wall or anything
No,
either?
no.
You're out.
So
Okay.
it's literally you're taking this and you're straight out, and you can't go too high, too low.
Okay.
It's all kind. You can't break that elbow. The thumb can't be above. Thumb's got to be down
Wow,
there.
so the
Pinky,
rules, okay.
supporting. So there's a lot of rules that come into play.
You get a little variance with movements, or
just slight variance up and down.
Yeah.
So what happens is you get strikes. So 3 strikes and you're out.
Oh, I
Now
see.
if you spill, you're out immediately.
Okay.
But if you start dropping it down too far, you're going to get a strike. And then again, 3 strikes and you're out.
Okay. Wow.
If you start supporting your back, or that kind of,
Once the first one starts, I imagine the second 2 follow pretty quickly.
yeah.
I don't
What
know.
happens is there's always 2 people left, and they are struggling fighting each other.
Okay. Yeah. And the guy with the advantage that's got the one strike versus the two probably is just hang on, man.
Yep,
Just hang
yep.
on.
That's going to be a fun time, and that's, as you said, October the 5th
Yeah,
here
we're gonna-
at the Blackstone.
So
in
We've
Nashville.
got
Please-
that Mark to be here for that.
Please come. We'd love
Yeah.
to have you guys here.
Yeah.
Are you going to wear your lederhosen?
I always wear my leather.
Outstanding. Awesome. Will the goat be with you?
The goat will be here. So we have a different goat every year. Sometimes we have multiple goats.
Okay.
But Chris Cooper, that works here in the brewery, Coop, as we call him, him and his wife, they raise goats. And so they have a little goat farm. So generally there's always at least one baby goat or a younger goat. And the kids, this is a family-friendly, Oktoberfest. So kids come, they play with the goat, got little horns on it. And no one's gotten hurt yet, knock on wood. But the goat, always makes great pictures, and people love being with the goat.
Is there a significance with the goat with Oktoberfest history, or just something cool to do?
So it's more or less something cool to get.
Just something
So
cool.
love it.
so if we want to talk about goat, that's going to be another podcast, I think.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about Bach beer.
There you go. We'll bring you back. We always love bringing you back.
Yeah, if we could do that,
Yeah,
that'd
definitely.
be awesome.
We cannot end this podcast, and we're not going to end this podcast. But before we end this podcast, we also have to ask you, because your fest beer is what we're drinking today. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I've seen it out in different stores around Middle Tennessee. How far away can people get it?
So we really only distribute in Middle Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah. So
But
Murphy's.
it's everywhere around here. Like,
Yeah.
I can go
Yeah.
anywhere and find it, which is
Yeah.
great.
So bars, restaurants, grocery stores, beer stores, craft beer stores.
So basically, it's a hint that if you're listening to us in other parts of the country, which apparently we know people are,
Yeah.
we get told that, come to Nashville.
Sure.
Or-
Come here and
Yeah.
get the fest beer.
So we get emails daily, people asking for a beer.
yeah.
Where can we? We're in New England. Where can we get your beer? We're in California. Wherever. And so we, there's other breweries that are smaller than us that have a further distribution. We purposely do not distribute further because we are pretty set here in Middle Tennessee, and we don't need to distribute further. And we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So my response to those people is it makes for a good excuse to visit Nashville.
Yep. Do that. Steve and I love to do beer trades with people around the country. So if anybody's interested in that, we'll ship you some. You
We
ship me
will,
some
absolutely.
Yeah.
We got some now.
Yeah.
Taking some home today.
And another little plug I would like to make for those that are also watching the video. So this label, our Fest Beer label,
Put the label back up.
so the original painting is over the bar there, but my godfather, whose birthday is on Thursday, we celebrated his birthday yesterday though, on Sunday, he turned 90. So
Happy birthday.
he painted the girl on there.
What?
Yeah. So
Aw,
that's
that's
his creation. And funny story with that was 8-9 years ago when we first released this beer, I said, Raymond, we're going to put your girl on a beer label. And he said, oh, okay. He didn't seem too impressed. And I'm like, okay. So we came out with the beer, and I brought him a 6-pack. I said, Raymond, here's your girl. And he's like, oh, that's cool. And he still didn't, he's like, I thought he'd be a little, thought it was a little cooler than that. So he came to me a few weeks later, and he said, I just bought this beer at Kroger. My painting's on the beer label. And I said, well, yeah, Raymond. Yeah, I told you it was on there. I think he thought I just did a special thing for him.
Yeah.
He didn't realize this is going out to the public.
Mass
That
produced.
is-
So everyone that's drinking Nashville Fest beer, Ray Rowland, my godfather, that's his painting. Yeah.
Show
We love
that
it.
label again.
Yes.
He painted that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah. So the Czech background was added in, but as far as the girl, yeah.
Well, Scott Touron, can we end more on a high note than that?
Well, I have other questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we were talking about where you can get the beer, and it's Middle Tennessee. However, you have fans around the world. Not newly discovered, because you had mentioned them back before we did our first podcast. But you've got a band that wrote a song about you, a German band. They're called, let me get this right, the BKC,
The BKC.
the Beer Killing Company, which is awesome. And they wrote a song about you called the Nashville Brewing Company.
Yeah, they did, and
How the hell?
they love our beer, and they love us, and they've been very nice to us on social media and everything, and so they wrote that song, and so maybe we can feature that song in this podcast,
We're gonna try to put that
in a
somewhere,
post
absolutely.
or something. Yeah.
Yep. I tried to put it on some social media stuff, and it wasn't in and I didn't know how to import it outside.
Yeah.
But we can put it on this thing somewhere. So that was cool. As a matter of fact, we reached out to them or tagged them or something. We had a little communication with them and stuff.
Awesome.
So
Good.
Cool. And I looked up some of the stuff that was. That was
It's one of those things. I think they mentioned that they have traveled to the U.S. quite a bit over the years, and this was the only brewery that they have found that really has brewed, and I'm not talking about Nashville, I'm talking about across the country, that has brewed beer like what they're used to in Germany.
That is awesome.
which is a great compliment.
And seriously, what does that mean to you?
I mean, winning awards and stuff is cool.
Yeah.
But hearing something like that from a local German saying, this truly is my favorite beer in the United States because it makes me feel like home. That's much better than any.
Any
award.
recognition that we weren't even trying for.
Yeah,
Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
We'll get a tag or something from somewhere like, how the hell do you know about us? And it's just a nice little thing. It's really cool. The song is good too. So I was singing it the other day. It kind of just kept going around and around.
Can you sing it for us?
It's been a couple days.
Okay.
It's kind of
all
like
right.
a country rock song.
Yeah, right.
It does say the Nashville Brewing Company. It does say that in there quite often. Something else we talked about last time we were together. You're writing a cookbook. How is that
I
coming?
am running. It is a little slower than I hoped, but it's coming along. I'm wrapping it up. The thing is like as you dive into something, you realize you got to go deeper.
Right.
Yeah. So
because aren't you making a lot of those meals even before you put them
oh
in
yeah.
there?
Oh yeah. I'm making everything before I put it in the book. What I struggle with is everything in the cookbook is made with beer. And I like to hunt, so I do a lot of game.
Ooh.
And so I tend to do things cooking with game, with beer. And I know game is not for everyone. And I know beer is not for everyone. But if I'm selling a beer cookbook, obviously beer is the thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm having to kind of modify things to make sure. But in the old days, in old Germany, I mean, we didn't, cook with beef. We cooked with venison.
Sure.
We didn't cook with, homegrown pig. We cooked with wild boar, et cetera. So those kinds of things, kind of having to modify from some of the game that I'm using to regular meat that you get, at a Kroger or a Publix.
Sure, because you want to make it something someone can actually go and get and make the recipe from.
Yeah.
Do you, not to put you on the spot, how far do you feel like you're into this thing, or is it just?
No, it's pretty far along. I'm being very critiquing of myself now before I get this out. I would like to get out before the end of the year, but realistically, it's probably going to be early next year.
Okay, all right. Well, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, well,
be cool. Steve can make me a couple dishes.
Oh, well, he could.
You got the recipe and stuff. Do you pick a specific beer or a specific style when you do? Obviously, you've got your own brands.
Yeah. So I in the book is not, it's not a Nashville Brewing Company book. So certainly I do a lot of stuff with our beer, but I'm trying to use a lot of other European beers too, and that's kind of the delay too, because I don't want this to be just to promote our brewery. It's a cookbook. So I'm using other beers, and so I'm using a lot of English recipes, using English beers and stuff as well, or Belgian beers, French beers. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Was there anything we haven't covered that you would love to talk about Oktoberfest-wise, or anything?
Yeah, I think Oktoberfest in general, it's a reason for everyone to get together and just have a good time, celebrate, of course, be safe. But it's fun to remember that what we celebrate, what we know of as Oktoberfest, has been going on for a little over 200 years. But really, that festival has been going on for centuries before that, and that's been celebrating that fall harvest.
Well, what's funny is we like summer beers. I like summer beers, and I love that transition into fall. No matter how early it is, it's an event, right? You don't feel anything when you go into summer beers or even winter beers for that matter. When you go into fall.
Yep.
that's a different thing. It's a different feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And the beers are
And
different.
I think here, being in the United States, red-blooded Americans, it's football season, too.
Yes.
It feels like football season.
Oktoberfest season rolls around, and I'm ready.
It's definitely a time. And like you said, when the weather starts getting a little cooler, it's nice. You have those days where you got the heat and the air conditioning on at the same time.
Yep. Or the World Series. Having the World Series when it's cool out and still watching baseball.
There you go.
Sometimes they get snowed out in the World Series. It goes so late. Depends on the country. So.
We love it.
Awesome. Well, you got anything else?
No, I think we're good, and I certainly appreciate it. Scott Mertie, Nashville Brewing, we appreciate it. Guys, let's raise our glasses to this man.
Pros.
Cheers.
Hey, everybody else in the bar, cheers.
Here's the best cheer.
Tyler. I know this. Tyler, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This
Cheers.
is going to
Thanks,
do
Scott.
it for the Brewery Underground Podcast. I'm Steve Sullivan. For Scott Touron.
Cheers.
Prost.